Welcome to the Bullpen. In the Bullpen today, he is a returning Bullpen guest. We have Christopher Neiweem. Christopher Neiweem is a Republican advisor and also founder of American Veterans Policy Network, AVPN. Christopher, good to have you back on Indisputable. How are you?
Doing well, Doc. Thanks for having me back on the show.
All right, so brother, you know I gotta ask you to do that damn Trump impression you did before you came on the show today. I thought that was hilarious. Let's just break the ice, making fun of Trump a little bit.
Well, it's not making fun, Doc. It's impersonations. And by the way, if I spend enough time around you, I can maybe impersonate you as well. But we do want to talk a little bit. We want to talk a little bit about the lawsuit because you know, Doc, you treat me very unfairly on this show. You know it. Everyone knows it. Your whole team knows it. I can hear it in the earpiece. But let's just have a little bit of fun here, okay?
All right, that's good enough, brother. Okay, I actually like that. I appreciate you breaking the ice that way. News of the day, obviously, Donald Trump announced that he is going to sue. He has already filed his lawsuit, district federal court in Florida, against the major guys, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And he's claiming, based on a specific allegation against Facebook and similar allegations against the other tech companies, that they violated his constitutional freedom of speech. I want you to tell us your thoughts about this lawsuit.
Right, so it's interesting. So I think that lawsuit is about sending a signal. It's about the free speech. And I think in the context of, the universe, it is sort of an encroachment on free speech. However, we get into this issue of a private company and a private platform that has rules. And so I think the lawsuit, I think there's merits in the signal of this. I think these are companies that should be challenged because of many other reasons about inequality of free speech and the way in which they implement the rules. So I think the purpose is to send a signal. The legal standard for prevailing this lawsuit, I think it's very high, and many legal experts don't believe that it will prevail. And in the complaint, they do have a jury request, which is interesting, to send this potentially to a jury, but the bar would be high. So I think that this lawsuit is about a signal and a conversation around free speech, as opposed to the idea you don't have it. It's a matter of debating it on this platform, so to speak.
Christopher, I think you just low-key admitted it's a BS lawsuit.
Well, it depends on what the lawsuit's trying to achieve, right? So I've actually won a federal lawsuit a few years back, defamation related, a little bit different, but the bar for winning a lawsuit is high. So it depends on what the purpose is. Sometimes you sue people to quiet them, to slow them down, to send a signal. But in terms of fighting to win, as the former president often said, I don't think that will happen here in the court.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because obviously he has a major issue. And the major issue is the actual US Constitution, because the Constitution says that Congress shall not make a rule or a law to abridge the freedom of speech. That's the Constitution. The last time I checked, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, they are not the US Congress. Congress cannot make a rule to limit or bridge that freedom of speech. But even with your freedom of speech, there comes the reality of responsibility. If you start to cry out fire in a crowded building, there's no fire. Well, you can be arrested if people get injured, right? So your freedom of speech has statutory limitations by law. Every freedom has a statutory limitation. Now, here's what I believe Trump is doing, brother. And I want you to tell me, am I completely off basis? I think Trump is playing his political base. I think he's making people believe that he actually has a credible lawsuit when you know he doesn't. His lawyers know he does not. He knows he has no credible lawsuit. I think he's playing his political base to do a few things. One, as a catalyst to get him back in the news and back in the conversation every day of the average American, because he no longer has the power of Twitter to make breaking news when he chooses. Number two, I think he has launched this lawsuit so that he can create a great evil. He likes to create his villains, and he's creating the new villain. The new villain is going to be these big tech companies. And when he loses the case, or the case gets thrown out, Christopher, he's going to then claim that the judges that threw it out, they are part of the problem, making them part of the villain argument. And he's going to raise, number 3, a whole bunch of money, not for the legal case, because they all know this is not actually going to trial. He would never subject himself to discovery or anything else, but he's going to raise a lot of money in the process over a case that is frivolous and truly fraudulent.
I don't think you're wrong in any of those points. I think that's sort of the chronology of the attack plan that the president's used in politics and in business, and it's served its purpose in many of those forums. But I think the key here, though, I think he's on to one thing, and I do think that the big tech is so unbelievably driven by us, and you can see certain folks get just hammered and shut down. And oftentimes with speech, we're in this era now where we're looking at violent altercations and incite to violence and these sensitive issues, but yet on the one hand, you could have implicit violence and statements that just fly around and there's no issue. And then you might have somebody maybe on the conservative side that makes an allusion to something, they're shut down. And oftentimes there's no court in the social media bar, so to speak. I mean, it is simply, we saw this. If you're a comedian, for example, and you make a joke in context, it's, you've been flagged for hate speech. Don't let it happen again. So you're going to keep your account, but you never get and that's happening a lot to conservatives. So I would say there's some merit to taking them on and putting this conversation out publicly. But then to be fair, if Republicans are free market, if you don't like the bar, go to the bar next door, open a new platform, something like that. So I would agree with you that, you can't have it both ways.
That was actually my second point of the hypocrisy that's involved here, because Republicans are big free market people. They believe that consumers or consumerism should actually drive the market reality, not regulation. Now think about how ironic this is, Christopher. You have a guy, Donald Trump, as well as others, who are saying we need regulation in this industry, but their political platform is a deregulation platform. But they would like the courts to get in and literally regulate private companies when that methodology and ideology is completely adversarial to their political platform. Please explain to me how these hypocrisies coexist within the Republican Party.
Well, those are challenging questions to answer, because obviously in politics you want to win, you want to focus on your agenda over here, and you don't want to get caught in areas where you have inconsistencies. And I think both parties fall into those things. It's challenging. I mean, I think that they're going to push to the sort of monopoly of big tech, but that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, essentially, it is what it is. I mean, that's kind of the name of the game in politics is, you try to run out the clock before, you have to get pinned down on that. We've seen that with folks on the left that are doing really big on civil rights issues. And then you have Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who's cornered, and he's asked a question about an all members white club, and he's running faster than the Roadrunner to his car. So, I mean, if we're looking for hypocrites in Congress, we've got nearly 435 of them in the House and 100 of them in the Senate some days.
So let me tell you, man, and I got criticized by a lot of Democrats for this. I called out that senator because his position is hypocritical to his actual lifestyle. And remember, in that case, this is out of Rhode Island. In that case, he literally owns or is part owner. His wife owns significant shares in a country club that will not allow black members. And he said he would basically discontinue his affiliation with them when he ran for Senate the first time. Well, they paid him off. He got money. His wife is now a majority shareholder. So my point in that is you got a price. Now, yes, you may vote the way I would like you to vote on most, if not many issues, but you have a price and you have told people you have a price, and I have a problem with that. So the difference between myself and some others, Christopher, I'm willing to call out Democrats as quick as I'm willing to call out you guys. And I'm comfortable in that space. But you're saying on my show that the hypocrisy that is evident here is basically just normative business. And I don't agree that our politics should run that way. I believe in a transformational matrix in politics rather than a transactional one. And if you're okay with the transactional element where you can present one value system one day and another value system the next based on your own selfish need, then we're all screwed. Would you not agree?
No, I would agree. It's frustrating to work within that paradigm, and we have elections. House elections are up every 2 years, and it's very seldom. I don't even really know what era we're in now. I mean, we've been in an era of divided government since the 1970s. Now we're in an era of almost bombastic politics. And what's interesting is if you look at some of the more visible members of the Congress, for example, the AOCs, Dan Crenshaw's, there are studies that show they're legislatively ineffective, which is kind of interesting because the way that the House is set up, you don't actually get a lot of opportunity to amend bills. So it's ironic we're looking at that, but then the whole, as you described, the sort of the chessboard of how things actually get done is often held up. So I totally agree with you. My emphasis though is I do think that if the conversation ends with the big tech companies taking a little more look at how can we come into the middle here and allow certain speech, I get it. And with the incitement to violence stuff, I agree 99%. The problem is if you have reporting, for example, that says Trump's followers, storm Capitol. The only issue I have with that is when you have a politician that says certain things, and then you have a Bernie Sanders supporter that shoots members of Congress, or you have Dallas police officers get shot the same week that Obama was talking about, there was an issue, and I'm not saying he's responsible for it, but I'm saying now do we get into every single public statement when 1% of a fraction of a crowd does something violent? Do you see what I'm saying? So I think we just have to look at the boundaries.
Let me make another argument and show a distinction that makes a difference. There are two elements in the law. One is called causation and the other is proximity. So when you look at causation, it is very clear because we now have testimony, sworn affidavits from individuals that raided the Capitol. Those insurrectionists said we would not have done it if Donald Trump did not tell us to. That's on the record. So you have causation. Causation is present. And then you have proximity. Proximity means that the criminal act happened within proximity of causation. So Trump says it, and within minutes, they were doing the criminal act. So you've proven causation, you've proven proximity, and you can prove the criminal activity. So that's the reason why that's different from, let's say, a random Bernie Sanders supporter committing an act of random violence, because you cannot prove causation and you cannot prove proximity, but you can only prove criminality. So those are the big differences. Let me go to another point you made about AOC and the squad not being legislatively effective. The study that you're referencing is actually talking about their legislative agenda in whole. Them getting 100% of what they are asking for. Now, true, they don't, but they push the needle. And pushing the needle in politics is still the way the political game works. Remember, this is chess, not checkers. So here's why it's not checkers. It's not checkers because it's not based on one move or the other. You're not defined based on one singular move. You're defined based on strategic alignment. You're defined based on how you can position the pieces in a way to give your side the ultimate advantage. And I make the argument that AOC and others, what they have been able to do is create more of a mainstream conversation and mainstream political approach as it relates to true progressive policies in the US Congress. Would you not agree that they have moved the needle, at least on the Democratic side, for what is acceptable as progressive policy?
They have, and I'll give AOC some credit on something. When you step up and you go out and you do something, you should be credited. I don't care if you are unemployed, living in the street, or what you are. If you go in and you run and you put yourself out there, I think you deserve credit. And that's something that I think is undercredited with her. So I do agree that they're moving the needle. We could probably disagree for several hours on whether some of these are good things. I think some of the aspects of the Green New Deal shut down the economy. But one thing about the discussion with Trump, I'd agree with you with one caveat. I could also statistically say if someone gives a speech and it's passionate and there's certain words that concern someone, if 99% of that crowd is peaceful and goes home and screams at the television, and then you have a small percent that commits a crime, I think we still have to look at I think there's still a conversation there. And lastly, it's the most striking thing to me is how the Capitol Police and how policymakers can't possibly be prepared for scenarios like that. I mean, our military's job is to protect our shores, right? I can't, if your job is to guard the Capitol and you let people go in there, I think everyone should have 10-year prison sentences. And I actually might sound radical. I think if you break in the Capitol, you should be shot. That's me. I might be totally in the rare thing there, but it surprises me that that was even.
That surprises you, brother?
What's that?
Come on, man. Come on, brother. And let me say this. I appreciate you saying that from my heart. I appreciate you saying that because you know and I know that if the people who stormed the Capitol broke in, made makeshift weapons, some brought weapons of their own. If this would have happened and their last names would have been Muhammad, they would have been killed. If this would have happened and those would have been black faces storming that Capitol, they would have been prepared. President Trump would have ordered a preparation in advance. The systems that failed us, that failed those members of Congress that day, Republican and Democrats, those systems decided not to take seriously the known threat that was coming. They already saw the social media rhetoric. They were well aware that people intended to do some level of violence. And they even called, according to the Capitol report, they called for backup. Backup came hours later. So you have all of these systemic failures. None of that would have happened if this would have been black folk, brown folk, folk of a particular religion. All of the systems would have worked just fine, brother. And I think you know it.
So I don't want to avoid the question. I first and foremost, I think whenever you have a high intensity situation, having overwhelming support and overwhelming security is a smart thing. And that was my primary point is I just don't think you should wait because once a problem happens, it's almost impossible to put the toothpaste back in the jar. I could speak to unknowns. I mean, certainly the president's, he had more influence to influence that situation in a positive way. But we've seen elected officials in the past give people space to room and destroy. They're going to keep going. I think certainly many public figures could be mindful of the things they're saying in certain scenarios. But look, my main point on that is I can't believe that we have a military budget of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and we can't afford to protect our capital on the one day where maybe something's going to jump off. I think that was a mistake at multiple levels of government. As we know, we've got the city, the district rather, we've got the Capitol Police, we've got the military. I just think it was a failure at multiple levels.
Yeah, but it also talks to the white privilege that exists in the United States because you cannot dismiss the fact that these were white people. That white people committed an act of domestic terrorism. And you as a former military man, you have to appreciate the irony here because you have said they should have been shot. Well, they weren't. Well, at least, 99.9%. Nothing happened, right? They're still trying to round them up because they were allowed to leave. They weren't even arrested there. They got to watch videos and say, okay, we got to go pick these people up. Why do they have to go pick them up? Because we made a big deal about it. They were allowed to leave after the terrorist attack. They were allowed to go home, cook dinner that night, get on their plane, get on the bus, drive their car, and leave a terrorist attack without criminal penalty whatsoever. Do you not think that there's a real correlation between what they did, how they got away with it initially, and the fact that they are white?
Well, the challenge, though, again, if we want to look at statistics, is if you look at the entire crowd, when we have a fraction of that population doing something, the generic response to that could be, well, 95% of the white crowd had nothing violent to do. And we could look at some of the urban violence all over the summer and we could get into, I think it gets a little difficult when you start looking at the statistical analysis of the criminality.
Oh, come on.
And one of the conversations, and one of the things, Doc, and this is important from our last conversation that's germane is, and there's societal reasons for this, in many of those traffic stops, African-American men are more likely to resist arrest. And there could be a variety of reasons for why compared to the Asian Hispanic in a study that we didn't get time to on the last show. So I think it's very important discussion, but we need to really focus in on the statistics. And I would just say, if 95% of a crowd isn't violent, we're looking at a different sample size. I think the Capitol should have been guarded more strongly. If you can't protect the Capitol, what the hell can you protect? I think that's outrageous.
And you were protecting more than the Capitol. You were literally protecting a constitutionally mandated process known as certification of the Electoral College. That's constitutionally mandated. You cannot tell me you love the Constitution and then you're willing to literally violate the actual Constitution in the process of the constitutional mandate. So you can't coexist in these worlds to me. Either you are or you are not, right? We only got 2 minutes left, brother. Let me ask you this question, because I think it's going to come up in this case that Trump has filed. He has filed a class action lawsuit. A class action lawsuit says, I'm the lead litigant, but I'm filing this lawsuit on behalf of all of these other conservative voices that have been silenced by this unconstitutional element from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Here's the problem with that argument on the other side. Candace Owens still got her social media account. Ben Shapiro still got his. Hannity, Tucker, all of the big social media talkers and broadcasters still have their social media accounts intact. So how is he going to make the argument that this is about conservatism when truly the reason why they still have their accounts intact is because they have not tried to incite violence, at least on the scale that Trump did? What's your answer to that?
Well, and that's why the suit will likely not prevail. That's what the counsel for the big tech will make, and I think that will work to their advantage. But you mentioned Ben Shapiro. He said some years ago, but he made an interesting point. He's like, we just have to be careful, whether it's Alex Jones or anybody. If we're going to blame someone, I mean, is Ozzy Osbourne responsible if someone takes their own life because they listen to a song called "Suicide Solution"? It's tricky, but I think you nailed it. That the sort of the broadness and the bully pulpit effect of the president is where that's coming from. And we have to be honest, obviously the relationship has not been friendly between the president and those executives from those companies. But hopefully the conversation will at least end with us taking closer looks at those things, because I do think big tech should at least have some accountability for implementing their own rules equally or closer to equal.
Okay, all right, and to the point about the song, the reason why a person or artist who sings a song or raps something cannot be held responsible for a criminal act because somebody listened to the song is because you need something called mens rea. You need mens rea, which means the intent to commit a crime in order for that to work, or the intent to radicalize somebody to commit a crime. Without that intent, you don't have the causation factor. Brother, I appreciate you being on the show again. Tell people how they can follow you on social media.
At Chris Neiweem, first name last, for Twitter, and I'm pretty easy to find. Thanks for having me, Doc.
Man, you're a very reasonable guy, man. I appreciate you being on Indisputable. Come back anytime.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate it.